In a grand palace, a wealthy man dressed in luxurious robes feasted at a lavish banquet. The table was filled with delicious food, fine wine, and the sound of music filled the air. Outside the gates, a poor beggar covered in sores lay helpless, longing for even the scraps from the table. But the rich man ignored him, too consumed by his own indulgence. Time passed, and both men died. The rich man awoke in a dark, fiery abyss, where flames tormented him endlessly. He cried out in agony, "Please, just a drop of water to cool my tongue." But no one answered. Meanwhile, the beggar was carried by angels to Abraham's side, where he rested in heavenly light and peace. One day, Mary was sitting in her room when a radiant angel appeared before her. The angel's light filled the room, and Mary was filled with awe and reverence. The angel said, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." The angel then delivered the good news of the coming birth of Jesus. Elsewhere, near Abraham's tent, 3 mysterious visitors arrived. They were angels sent to announce that Sarah would bear a son. In the distance, the city of Sodom burned as Lot and his family fled. But Lot's wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. In the opulent palace of Pharaoh, Moses, a bearded man with a staff, stood boldly before the king of Egypt. He demanded that Pharaoh let the Israelites go, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. After a series of plagues, Moses led the Israelites to the edge of the Red Sea. As the Egyptian army closed in, Moses raised his staff, and the waters parted, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. When the Egyptians pursued them, the waters rushed back, swallowing the army whole. On Mount Carmel, the prophet Elijah stood alone before a stone altar. He prayed to God, asking him to reveal his power. Suddenly, fire fell from heaven, consuming the altar and the sacrifice. The priests of Baal watched in shock and fear. Later, when Elijah's time on earth was complete, a chariot of fire descended from heaven and carried him up in a whirlwind of divine glory. In the palace of Babylon, Daniel, a man of great wisdom, stood before King Nebuchadnezzar. The king had a troubling dream, and Daniel interpreted it as a warning from God about the rise and fall of kingdoms. Years later, Daniel was thrown into a den of lions for refusing to abandon his faith. But God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths, and Daniel emerged unharmed. In the beautiful Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve stood beneath the forbidden tree. A shimmering serpent appeared, tempting Eve to eat the fruit God had forbidden. After eating it, they realized their nakedness and felt shame. When God came to the garden, he banished them from Eden. A mighty angel with a flaming sword stood guard, preventing them from returning. Noah stood before the massive ark he had built at God's command. Pairs of animals entered the ark, preparing for the great flood that was to come. In another place, Abraham gazed at the night sky, filled with countless stars. God promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, even though Abraham and Sarah were old and childless. In a humble stable, warm light shone from a manger where the baby Jesus lay. Shepherds from the fields came to worship him, while angels sang praises in the heavens. Wise men from the east followed a shining star, bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Jesus, wearing a crown of thorns, carried a heavy wooden cross through the dusty streets. Roman soldiers followed, and crowds shouted as he made his way to Calvary. After his death on the cross, 3 days later, the tomb was found empty, and a radiant light shone forth, signaling his resurrection. After a long journey, Jacob lay down to rest, using a stone as his pillow. In his dream, he saw a golden ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. God stood beside him and promised to bless him and his descendants.